What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Commander Ad Populum. Together we are Commander for the people, by the people, for the people. My name is Ryan. This is episode 42. It's great to have you along. Welcome. If you're a new listener, welcome back. If you're a returning listener, either way, great to have you here. I appreciate all of the listens, the downloads, the shares of the show, the likes when I post a thread on the Facebook or Twitter threads for the show at CAD Popcast, and of course Commander Ad Populum on Facebook. Got a jam-packed show today because we're starting a new block in the set retro. I've got a quick hit on the technical section for newer players. And of course, we've got a cool community topic that I thought of just kind of out of the blue when I was watching a documentary. But before we get to any of that, huge thank you to FusionGamingOnline.com. They are there for all of your gaming needs. They're based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, so very close to me in the Canadian prairies. And if anybody's interested in altered art cards, of course, you can get them from Fusion if you don't want to send them abroad, across borders, blah, blah, blah. Because Fusion is so close to me, I get them within 2 to 3 days, usually 2 to 3 business days. And with a quick turnaround on my desk to do whatever the alteration is, they go back out the door. And it makes for quick and efficient work for me. And for you, it means you get your altered card and you can jam it in your deck in relative short order. Moving right along, big thank you to the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/cadpopcast. Couldn't do the show without you guys. I very much appreciate the support. New patron shoutouts. I had an episode in the bag last week, so I missed one, and then we have a new supporter this week. Welcome to the family, the Discord family, the community that we've built. Alex Garreau and Greg Jones. Great to have you. Two guys that I've talked with lots on altering cards and sending cards and shipments and donating to kids, and it's all stuff that we've talked about doing with cards in the past. So it's great to see them hop over here from Commander Cookout to Commander Ad Populum. Like I said, I do appreciate all of the support, whether it's patron pledges or, Twitter retweets, follows, commenting on anything that I do. Like, it all helps everybody. Like, it's not all about the Patreon. It all really does help. The engagement, the download numbers, it all means a lot to me. Even from a very egotistical standpoint, you know what I mean? It's like, oh man, my thing got like whatever, 10 likes or whatever it is. Everybody knows how that feels. So to have the show grow as it is, it does mean a lot. And with that, I'd like to move right into our community topic today. It's kind of an interesting thing that I thought up. I'm laying on the couch the other day, and just randomly, my kid is into these gold mining shows, like Gold Rush Yukon on National Geographic Channel, or like Ice Road Truckers on Discovery, right? Anything that's got big machines and tractors and bulldozers and tow trucks and anything like that. He's a little 2-year-old, so he likes all of that stuff. And right after that, he went to bed, a documentary came on, and it explores our solar system, and this particular episode was on Saturn. And they talked about all of the unlikely circumstances that came together to make Saturn what it is and give it its rings and all this stuff. And it got me thinking a little bit. Saturn is the only thing like it in our solar system, says this documentary. And I thought, I'm thinking about Magic all the time. I thought, every game of Magic is like Saturn. Every one is unique. At any one point in time when you're playing a game of Commander, nobody else, other than the people in your pod, of course, nobody else is playing a game quite like that. And you could jam, 100 games in a row, same 4 people, same 4 decks, and you might get similar scenarios. But even then, you'd start to develop a little bit of a metagame, and you'd start to see different tricks and people bluffing or holding or being more aggressive or sitting back and letting other people do work for them. You'd get this dynamic, this little ecosystem or solar system, right? If you played 100 games with the same people and decks. But that isn't real life. Like, not even in your weekly play group do you always play the same people with the same decks. That makes every single game of Commander unique. And I was thinking, like, whenever you're having a really good game, well, enjoy the moment, right? And be a gracious winner or gracious loser and soak it all in, because this is the only time that this exact thing is going to happen with you and your 4 friends and you having a good time. And the same is true for the opposite end of the spectrum, where if you're just getting hauled and it sucks and you're playing the wrong deck, or somebody wasn't super honest about the power level of their deck, the whole rule 0 thing, just be a gracious loser, because this is the only time that this exact thing is going to happen. And I just think that that's such a romantic idea, that every single game, the whole universe is essentially rotating around this game when you're in it. And it's the only one that's like what it is like. And it's fleeting, and you have to appreciate it no matter if it's a good game and it goes in your favor or not. So I just thought I'd share that idea that I had. I never really thought like that before until I watched a documentary on space, of all things. My wife calls me a nerd because I like space documentaries, and I'm like, really? That's why I'm a nerd? Really? I'm sitting in a studio surrounded by 4 walls and a green screen talking to myself. It's the space documentaries that make me a nerd. Thanks, honey. So anyways, I thought I'd share that. We're going to get into a quick technical section just after this. Talked about this before in previous episodes. I'll see if I can find the episode and link it in the description, but we're talking about battlefield organization, and this is a little bit targeted at new players, where I said, always have your lands where they are and organize them according to how many mana or what color mana they tap for. Have your graveyard, library, exile, command zone, situated in the same way every time. Artifacts, enchantments, creatures, your attack zone or red zone. If you move your creatures forward, maybe to the front edge of your playmat, for example. I think that most people do this, and it's both a byproduct of watching more experienced players, but it's also a byproduct of just wanting to stay organized. And I wanted to remind everybody of that because I think it's very important. I still see people, missing triggers and doing the takesy-backsy thing, or, if there's a blood artist and it's somebody else's turn or 2 turns later, and they say, oh yeah, hey, I forgot to trigger my blood artist, lose a life, I'll gain a life, right? In casual tables, that's okay. And usually with strangers, like at a Magic Fest or what have you, it's fine. But it starts to just wear on people if you're not paying attention to that, or if your battlefield isn't organized enough to be able to handle all that mentally. So we've talked about that before. I want to talk about a new one, and this is something that new players, maybe just their level of preparedness doesn't allow for this to happen, but once you hear it, you're going to say, oh yeah, that does make sense, or I should do that. And today we're talking about being prepared for the auxiliary or the extraneous things that aren't necessarily part of the game. Dice, have some, right? You're going to have planeswalkers, you're going to have +1 counters or what have you, right? People will lend them to you, but what if there's 2 people that don't have them, and the other person's playing a Super Friends deck or a +1 counters deck and they don't have any more, right? The same is true for tokens. They do come in every pack, at least the tokens that are specific to the set you're buying the pack from, but lots of times there's crossovers. There's goblins in almost every set. There's zombies in almost every set, soldiers, etc. Just have them. Keep them in a token box if you have a bag or a case or whatever that you carry your decks in, or keep them right in the same deck box that you carry the deck that uses that token in. Further to that point, if you are playing a token-style deck or something that can put tokens into play over multiple turns, I do like having 2 copies of any token and the dice to correspond to them. Okay, let's say this turn I put in 2 goblins. I'll put my goblin token down and I'll put a 2 on it. That is to represent the number of goblins there are. Next turn, I've got my 2 goblins, and then I put 2 more onto the battlefield. I put my second copy of goblin token down with a 2 on it. This way I have 2 tokens that can attack and 2 tokens that have Summoning Sickness and can't attack. The third turn, I move my 2 and 2 onto one goblin token and I put a 4 on it because all of those can attack now, and I make 2 more with my token that can't attack, right? And I've even seen people write like Summoning Sick token with a Sharpie on their token, right? To say like, this is how I differentiate. The other way that you can do it is, of course, this is the goblin thing. Like, it's funny, it's only ever goblins too. Somebody playing a Krenko deck, for example, will have like 100 goblin tokens. And every time they make, Krenko will make 10 tokens. They'll put 10 tokens on the battlefield. I would highly suggest that you stack them up so you can just see the name as a means to count them quickly and efficiently, but also to make it so you can put your hand on the whole pile and turn it sideways as to not take time when you're moving to combat. And then the same can be true with the ones that can't attack. Keep those in a separate pile. So just little tips and tricks on how to organize your tokens, because it does matter. Soldier decks, Sapperling decks, Goblin decks. I'm sure Sliver decks, if anybody's playing like Sliver Queen or what have you, very important. The next thing I want to cover, going back to dice, have dice for your planeswalkers, right? But some planeswalkers make emblems, and the emblems, even in packs, they're included, but they're hard to get a hold of sometimes because the token slot for mythic cards, like the planeswalkers, the tokens are printed less frequently on the advertising and token sheets when they roll off a printing press. So that token will be printed less frequently. It'll show up in packs less frequently. They're harder to get. I've seen people just make paper and pen or Sharpie, or they take a token. There's lots of creative things you can do, blank cards, or like in the old World Champ decks, they used to come with these they're kind of like white cards with gold borders, and you can proxy on them or what have you. There's all kinds of stuff like that. You can slip a perfect fit over something and write on it with a Sharpie or just a penny sleeve, and when you're done with it, you just throw the penny sleeve out. I've seen that. I've seen dry erase stuff. You can go online and find a plethora of stuff like this. The point is, have something to represent your emblem. If you have nothing, what I've seen as well is you minus the like minus H or Elspeth or whatever to make an emblem to make all your guys indestructible. That Elspeth would then go to your graveyard. I've seen somebody just say, I have no way to get this back. I'm going to turn this Elspeth upside down on my battlefield to represent the emblem. That way I know it should be in my graveyard because it's upside down on my battlefield, but you guys know that it's also dead because it's upside down. And I don't mean face down so you see the back of the sleeve. I mean upside down, so when you're reading like the words, it's upside down. So just a quick tip, if you don't have any emblem tokens or you're not creative enough to just put pen to paper or what have you, you got to be able to accurately represent the board state. It makes it easy for yourself, and it makes it easy for your opponent, so there's no feel bads or takesies backsies or, I wouldn't have attacked you if I knew you had that emblem, right? So just find ways to be creative like that. Find ways to represent the board accurately, and of course, token players, find ways to represent and move your game pieces efficiently. Dice on one token or 2 tokens, for example. I don't recommend the stack of 85 goblin tokens. It just doesn't work very good. Counting cards and tapping and the manipulation of all the cardboard, it doesn't work. So use dice, track efficiently. Now, on to Odyssey. So the Odyssey block is special for me, like Invasion before it. I was heavy into Magic, the Invasion storyline and the Apocalypse and the end of the war just ended, and that was like in September or whenever I said last episode it ended. This is the October 1st, 2001 big set. 350 cards in this puppy. So we're going to blast through a bunch of them. Of course, like a lot of the Magic sets of old, it doesn't have a ton to offer, but what it does offer for the format of Commander, it offers. It is shoving it down your throat. Examples: Odyssey was the first set to feature the mechanics Flashback and Threshold. And everybody's familiar with Flashback. It lets you cast stuff from your graveyard. Threshold, not so much. Threshold is a mechanic where a card has threshold or does something extra if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. And there's some good ones and some hidden gem ones. So we'll probably talk about both of them. The point is, it was a Graveyard Matters set, and that theme was sort of carried throughout the entire Odyssey block. This would have actually been a great show to have Gavin on to talk about Odyssey. Maybe we'll have him back. Gavin, if you're listening, let's talk Odyssey. So storyline-wise, takes place about 100 years after the invasion. There is this all-powerful artifact called the Mirari. It's held by the Cabal. They are I'm going off of memory here. They are the most powerful of the civilized things, and they have a ring of pit fighting sport type thing, and that's who some of our characters are. They are these people that fight in these pits for people to bet on, and the champions are the ones that don't die. They win money. So we're going to see them when we talk about the legendary creatures in the set and the next couple sets. And there's a bunch of brothers and sisters and how they all interact. And the Mirari, we didn't know it at the time, but the Mirari was actually some other important artifact that we're going to get to in future sets that was sent to Dominaria from somewhere else. I'm going off memory here, but that's what I remember. As we do, we like to take a look at some of the cycles, and there was some fine ones and there was like some bad ones, or like in most cycles, there was one of them was good and nobody actually knows that it was part of a cycle at this point in time, right? We're talking about 19 years ago. Terravor was from a cycle. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands in graveyards. It's like a 3-drop. That saw play in Legacy for a while, and I've seen it do some work in Commander decks, like the Lord Windgrace decks or decks that have incidental land destruction in them, Keldon Firebombers or what have you. Mostly Jund decks that care about sacrificing their own land, or Gruul decks that care about sacrificing their own land to make their Terravor big. There was a cycle of Retrievers, and a couple of them were good, Auramancer, Gravedigger, and Cartographer, but Cartographer has fallen out of favor as far as, I think it fetches a land back from your graveyard. Again, just memory. We're going to hit it when we see all the cards. I know that I saw the picture when I was going through the set. I remember what the picture looks like. There's sack lands that give you mana of any color. That could be important to some decks. There's threshold lands. Those were important in Standard and Legacy. Standard, then Extended, and also Legacy for a while. I play exactly one of them. We'll talk about that in a sec. Of course, Atag's one of my favorite creature type. We'll talk about that as well. There was egg cards. So those are the 1 or 2 mana things that give you mana when you sacrifice them and draw a card. Those are important in combo decks. Brea decks play those. So there's lots of just little stuff. And of course, the filter lands as well. The original filter lands, the ones or the signet lands, some people call them. They don't do anything by themselves, but when you pay 1 and tap it, they give you 2 mana. So they work like signets do. So lots of cool stuff. There was some reprinted cards that, if we talk about them, we'll talk about them. And then there was a funny thing, a functional reprint. Avon Fisher was a functional reprint of Kingfisher. Anybody who is familiar with the decks that I take to Magic Fest will know that those cards are actually in my Lord of Tressorhorn deck. Just thought I'd mention it just because it's kind of funny. When they're 2/2 flyers for 4. When they die, they draw you a card. It's fine. So cool set, lots of little nooks and crannies that these cards can fill in niche circumstances. So I actually like that because it's going to be something that nobody's ever heard of, right? Like when I say Cabal Pit is in my lands deck, or Kingfisher's in my Lord of Tressorhorn deck, it's the kind of thing that, or Avon Fisher, it's the kind of thing that I know that I like to play. So if you like that, listen on. Legendary creatures, we've got Aboshan, Cephalid Emperor. Sure. 3/3 for 6. Blue 4. You can tap and untap Cephalid you control. So Cephalid Tribal Commander, we're already on our way. Tap and untap Cephalid you control. Tap target permanent. Cool. Also, blue. Tap all creatures without flying. What? So you just lock the board down, right? Every time you've got 3 mana, just lock all the creatures down that don't fly. Cool. Okay. Next commander, Atagatag. So for a long time, this was one of our only Wooburg commanders. 5/5 for white, blue, black, red, green, sacrifice an Atog. Atagatag gets +X, where X is the sacrificed Atog's power. And anybody familiar with the Atog tribe will know that they all have an ability, sacrifice something. And Atog gets +1 or +2/+2. And the color of the Atog actually dictates the thing that they sacrifice. So the red one, red hates artifacts. So the red Atog, the original, will sacrifice an artifact to give it +2/+2. The white one in Odyssey will sacrifice an enchantment. It happens to also be green. If you sacrifice a land, it'll get +2/+2 either way. Or sorry, +1. So we've got a band commander, Braid's Cabal Minion. That's a 2/2 for black 2. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact, creature, or land. So people were building mono black stacks decks that were way too consistent because all the black tutoring, and because black can make so much mana, they would lock you out of the game until they can kill you. Necropotents and Exsanguinates and every tutor, you know the deck. Moving on, Cabal Patriarch. So this was like the boss of the bad guys. He's a 5/5 for black 3. You can pay black 2, sack a creature. Target creature gets -2/-2. Or black 2, exile a card from your graveyard. Target creature gets -2/-2. So you could pay 6 and give something -4. He's a human wizard or something. He's, moving on. I feel like I'm going to say that a bunch of times. Cabal Pitfighter's our next one. 6/1 for red 4. Haste. Tap him to deal 3 damage. He'd been way cooler if he was a 7/1. Just throwing that out there. Cool art. He's one of the main characters, as is Braids, I should have mentioned. Lieutenant Kitar is next. 2/2 flyer for white 1. Pay 1 and white. Sacrifice Lieutenant Kitar. Remove target attacking creature from the game. Now, in the set, there were ways to get cards back from the graveyard. Every color in Odyssey did interact with the graveyard, so you could maybe get this back. Maybe you wanted an extra card in your graveyard once the 2/2 was outclassed by whatever's attacking you, but it is a bird soldier, so it goes in bird tribal. Shout out to Zach Taylor from Commander Social. Piana Nomad Captain is the next one. It's a 2/2 for white 1 again. When Piana Nomad Captain attacks, attacking creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. So this is an Anthem effect, but it has to be attacking. So soldier decks, I'm sure these would be a welcome addition, or Anthem.decks, decks that just want to drop white weenies and buff them and swing in. This is probably something that could go in those decks. Finally, and this is probably the most powerful commander out of all of them, this is Satin Crossin Protector. 2/2 for green. Tap an untapped druid you control, add a green to your mana pool. So druid tribal, the funny thing about it is most druids, at least elf druids, and particularly the ones that cost less than 3, so you can play them before Satin, they already tap for green, like Llanowar Elves is an elf druid, right? The thing is, if you play those after Satin, he just wants you to tap things as part of his activation, so you get around summoning sickness. So all of a sudden, your elves that cost you a green tap for a green immediately, making themselves free. And if you have something like a Recycle, or you're playing something like Allurin, those are going to net you mana now. So this guy's got combo potential. He's got big mana potential. This is a cool card. Like I said, probably the best one out of the 8 of them that are in Odyssey, though Abushan's Cephalan Empress is pretty cool, but 6 mana. Moving on to the set proper, first card in the set, number 1, Aegis of Honor. It's an enchantment for white. You can pay 1. The next time an instant or sorcery of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, that spell deals that much damage to its controller instead. So you can't use it to save yourself from a earthquake or comet storm or what have you, but if that is something that exists in your meta, jam this. There's a lot of damage-based spell slinger decks. It also doesn't work against Exsanguinate because that's loss of life, but it's kind of a niche card. That's what I was talking about before, where it's like, hey, that actually would go good against my meta. Now, first one I want to talk about, part of a cycle that I actually forgot about until just exactly now. Animal Boneyard. It's an enchant land, and there's one for each color. This one is 3 mana. Enchanted Land has tap, sack a creature, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So if you are in some kind of enchantment deck, enchantress deck, this could go in there instead of your 38 or 39th land if it's a high market. High market being a land that lets you sack a creature to gain a life. This is an enchantment, so it checks that box if you care. And it's also a sack outlet that goes onto a land. So anyways, it's cool. Next card, Auramancer, 2/2 for 3, enters the battlefield. You get a card back from your, an enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. This is the enchantment Gravedigger. And Gravedigger, of course, also in Odyssey, along with Cartographer and Anarchist and whatever the blue one was. Next up, another niche card. And this one goes in your decks that run Relentless Rats, Rat Colony, 7 Dwarves, Persistent Petitioners, anything that you can play multiples of in a deck. Aven Shrine, enchantment for white, 1. Whenever a player casts a spell, that player gains X life, where X is the number of cards in all graveyards with the same name as that spell. So if you had 10 Relentless Rats and they got swept off the board with a Wrath of God or what have you, and you have your Aven Shrine, well, then you play your Relentless Rats and you just gain 10 life. Gain 10 life every time you cast it. I thought that one was cool. Next up, this goes in decks right along things like Orem's Chant or Silence. It is Cease Fire. White 2, instant, target player can't cast creature spells this turn. Draw a card. So this is great against those aggro decks. It might mean the same thing as a Silence if the only thing that they were going to play is creatures. The Nikki of the Old Ways players cringe at that card, I'm sure. This is the last white enchantment, I swear. Then we're going to have to hurry it up here. Else I could talk about Odyssey all day because I love this set too, just as much as Invasion. This is Delaying Shield. It's an enchantment for white 3. If you would be dealt damage, put that many delay counters on Delaying Shield instead, so it's a replacement effect. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove all delay counters from Delaying Shield. For each 1 delay counter removed this way, you lose 1 life unless you pay white 1. So if you've got the mana, you put this on the stack, remove all the delay counters. Let's say you were gonna take 10 damage from getting attacked last turn. During your upkeep, you're gonna lose 10 life when you remove those counters, unless you can just pay mana into that. Well, if you've got a mana engine, or if you just want a Delaying Shield out to save you for a turn, so it could come back around to you, so you could get an attack in. That's something to look at. That's a cool card. Or maybe something that allows you to remove all counters from something. That would be good too. Oh man, there's so many. There's destroy target token creature. Each creature has protection from its colors. There's Graceful Antelope. It's got Planeswalk. Karmic Justice. Whenever something that we control is destroyed, we can destroy something else. It's an enchantment. I'm skimming through the rest of white now just so I can give everybody kind of a feel for the color. Lots of enchantments, lots of weird stuff with enchant creatures, some weird graveyard stuff. Shelter was in Odyssey. Feather players are going to know that. Moving on to blue, Careful Study. I don't know if anybody plays this in Commander, but this was a card. Just blue sorcery, just for a blue. That's it. Draw 2, then discard 2 cards. Draw 2, then discard 2. That's interesting. We definitely play stuff like that in black. And if we're going to pair this with black and we're okay with it in black, well, why don't we just pay less mana and no life and still just put cards in our graveyard? Like draw 2, surveil 2, lose 2. Draw 2, mill 2, lose 2. Those are black cards and they cost 3. This costs 1. It's going to maybe enable Threshold. It's going to enable, your graveyard strategy. That's a cool one. Chamber of Manipulation is the blue Enchant Land. These are all uncommons as well. And this one is blue 2 Enchant Land. And Enchanted Land has tap, discard a card from your hand, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Ditch my island on turn 85, tap my mana, tap my Enchanted Land, steal your Blightsteel. Like, what? Now, of course, it doesn't give it haste, but everybody's running Swiftfoot Boots, everybody's running Lightning Greaves. This is a card. This is a real thing. That's a cool one. Here's the card that was on that Aboshan Cephalid Empress or whatever its name was. Deluge. Blue 2 instant, tap all creatures without flying. Sounds like Toxic Deluge, where you pay life. It's colored pip and 2 and does something to all creatures. This is just regular Deluge. Reguluge. So that's a cool one. Patron Wizard, original printing. I think only printing. I think this card's expensive. Patron Wizard is a 2/2 for blue, human wizard. Tap and untap wizard you control. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Seems trivial, but let's say you have 10 wizards. You just tap like 4 of them. And if they don't have 4 extra mana or 10 extra mana, they're not going to cast that spell. Yeah, $10 for this card, $40 foil. Just throwing that out there. I like Peak. Maybe if you're running Gitaxian Probe, you also want Peak, but it's an instant for blue. Look at target player's hand, then draw a card. So it's basically exactly Gitaxian Probe, except it's an instant, but you can't pay 2 life for it. So that's a cool one. Predict is another one. I think Doomsday players sometimes play Predict because it lets you name a card, then reveal the top of your library. If it matches, you draw 2 cards. It's a good one. It's an instant. I think that's another expensive foil, maybe a $40 foil there for the Odyssey one because it's the only foil, unless the Mystery Boosters comes in foil, but I don't think it does because the Odyssey one's a $42 foil. So if you got those, trade those puppies in. Standstill was a legacy card for a good long while. Just mentioning it. Original printing for Time Stretch. Blue 8. Target player takes 2 extra turns. Remember, new players, you can swerve that or misdirect it to yourself because it says target player. Traumatize. Original printing. Mill half your opponent's library. Or mill half yours if you want to swerve it to you if you're playing some graveyard deck. Another banned card. Here we go. Upheaval. So this is the first set with 2 banned cards, I think. Unless you're counting Alpha Beta Unlimited, but I don't think we are. Moving on to black, we've got Buried Alive. Now this is a reprint. I think it was in Tempest or Stronghold originally. It was again in Odyssey. Black 2. Search for 3 creatures. Put them into your graveyard. Excellent card. Cornerstone of black decks, black combo decks, CEDH black decks. This is a real card. The black Enchant Land. I just like these, so I'm going to read all of them. Caustic Tar. Black 4. Holy. Enchanted Land has tap. Target player loses 3 life. Not that good. Not that good. Just saying. Moving on. Diabolic Tutor. This was huge when this was printed. People are like, oh my god, they're unconditional tutor in black. Oh, the end of days, mono black control this, right? All this, right? It's fine. Black 2. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. It's fine. It's demonic tutor, except it's like at a fair price. And they've printed way more broken tutor since then, in my opinion. Here's one right here. Entomb. This is an instant. Search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Important things there. This card costs black and no other cost. It's an instant. Remember that, people. You can Entomb at the end of your opponent's turn as to avoid graveyard removal till the last possible moment. Final thing to know about Entomb. Search your library for a card. Doesn't need to be a creature card like Buried Alive has to be. Entomb is a mighty card, and I'm sure it's won a ton of people Magic games throughout its 19-year history. Shout out to Filthy Cur. Terrifying art, awesome name. It's a hound. It's bad. It's everything that I like Magic cards to be. Look it up. Filthy Cur. C-U-R. I think that's Cur. Maybe it's Sir. It's probably Cur. Ghastly Demise was in this set. This was destroy target non-black creature if its toughness is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So I haven't mentioned any flashback or threshold spells yet, but here's another one that cares about stuff in your graveyard. So just interesting. I'm sure we'll hit some threshold stuff eventually. Innocent Blood is next, just black sorcery. Each player sacks a creature. It's great for us if we're playing zombie tokens, whatever, or some kind of graveyard strategy. It's great against Voltron, or if somebody has an imposing board where every creature is really good, you can just make them sack one of them. Mind Slicer is the next one. I think this was the original printing for Mind Slicer. I know it was in 8th edition, maybe 9th edition after this. It's a 4/3 for black 2. When Mind Slicer dies, each player discards their whole hand. And the theory was everything after Mind Slicer, you didn't care about because you just wanted Threshold, or the stuff that you discarded had flashback. So you would just crash in with your 4 power, 4 mana cost creature until they were forced to block it. And then when you discarded your hand, it made your other stuff better, or it gave you access to cards that had flashback so you could still cast them. So super cool card. That was, it's cool. Now it's cool with Madness cards, right? The Anya Falconwrath deck, or if you're playing some kind of flashback thing, zombie thing, it's a cool card. Same kind of vein, Sadistic Hypnotist. That is a tongue twister. 2/2 for 5, sack a creature, target player discards 2 cards, only do it as a sorcery. Just start sacking creatures. I played this in Lord of Tressorhorn for a good long while, just to shred people's hands. And when I sack creatures in that deck, they all have dies triggers, so I'm drawing cards, playing more creatures, sacking more creatures. It's great. Skeletal Scrying, or Skeletal Scrying, if you're Canadian. Apparently everybody in Canada says that word as skeletal. Everywhere else on the planet, I'm sure it's skeletal. Anyways, essentially it's Sign in Blood or Knight's Whisper, where you draw X and lose X, where this is actually an X spell. Catch is you also have to exile X cards from your graveyard. So you have to have the fodder there in your graveyard, but let's say you got 10 cards and you got like 10 mana, just draw 10, lose 10, you got 30 life, you're good. Tainted Pact, for all intents and purposes, this is a tutor in CEDH or commander in general. I'm not going to go into it. When every card in your deck has a different name, you're going to find the card that you're looking for with Tainted Pact. If you need another black tutor, just throwing that out there. Oh, see, I'm scrolling through again, and this is one that I missed when I did the initial once-over for Odyssey. Zombie Infestation, one of my favorite black cards. You can tell I'm excited. This is black, 1, discard 2 cards. There's that discard thing again, right? You created 2/2 black zombie creature token. Oh, you haven't lived until you've turn 1 zombie infestation. Turn 2 victimize, where you victimize your zombie token to get your Shieldred and your Grave Titan back, because those are the 2 cards that you discarded to zombie infestation. Turn 2 Shieldred, turn 2 Grave Titan. Boom. That's how you win games of Magic right there, sort of. And just to round out the black category, Zombify. This is actually the first printing of the card Zombify. We've seen it again in 8th and 9th and, Magic 25, and it had 2 different promos, but essentially black, 3, return target creature from your graveyard to play. That's it. Okay, here, I found one that has flashback that made me happy, because this was a standard all-star, and I've played these. I've got, the foreign language foil ones. This is Firebolt. It's a sorcery speed shock. So red, 2 damage to target creature or player. Catch is, this is Odyssey's version of shock. So they made it a sorcery, but they gave it flashback for red 4. An interesting note of the Odyssey flasher backers, when you fan them out in your hand to make that little fan of 7 cards in your opening hand, the flashback cards had a little tombstone in the upper left corner just prior to the first letter on the name line, and that was to signify that this did something when it was in your graveyard. And I don't think they ever continued that on any other cards. No promos, Time Spiral, Innistrad printings or reprintings of any of the cards that had flashback that were from Odyssey originally. They have that and nothing else does. So I know I've been asked on a couple occasions from new players, what is that thing? And it's nothing. It just signified that it did something when it was in your graveyard. I like that. I think it makes those cards unique. I wish they would do that kind of stuff more often, but of course it doesn't tell you what that little tombstone thing is, so new players of course would not know what it is. Next red card, Price of Glory, enchantment for red 2. Whenever a player taps a land for mana during another player's turn, full stop, destroy that land. That is awesome. Seize the Day was originally in Odyssey. Voltron players, kind of combo players, are going to know what that is. Untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. So it's an attack doubler, and it also has flashback. So for 7 mana, it's an attack tripler for 1 creature. Now, if math serves me correctly, you've got a 7 power commander, If it has a hole to crawl through or bash through for 7 damage, you seize the day, hit them for 7 again. You flashback, seize the day, hit them for 7 again. This card can kill people with 7 power commanders. So this is a cool card. I've seen it do work. It's even better when you can return it to your hand instead of flashing it back. Or in newly minted C19 Savine deck, when you flash it back, you get to copy it. So you can target another creature to attack. That's a cool card. Moving on into green, there was like this squirrel sub-theme in Odyssey, and one of the cards is put a 1/1 green squirrel creature token onto the battlefield for 1. It's got flashback for 2. I just thought that that's funny. I don't know. Ground Seal was originally in Odyssey. When it enters the battlefield, it's an enchantment for 2. You draw a card, and cards in graveyards have Shroud. You can't target them. So that'll shut off graveyard decks. That's cool. Overrun was in this. That card still sees play in green stompy decks. I know it's been outclassed at the 5 mana slot, but when you want other Overrun effects in redundancy, you probably are going to run Overrun. Squirrel Nest. There it is. That's what made me think of the other squirrel made me think of Squirrel Nest. So there's Squirrel Nest is an Enchant Land. This is the green one. I know I skipped the red one. Who cares? Green, 2. Enchanted Land has tap. Put a 1/1 green squirrel creature token onto the battlefield. This is the cornerstone of a bunch of combo decks where you could untap the land when the creature enters the battlefield, and you can just continuously make squirrels. You can literally just Google Squirrel Nest combo and all the different variations of it will come up. If you're this type of squirrel person that I know lots of people are, there's also Squirrel Mob. This sounds like it's an uncard. This is a 2/2 for green 1. Squirrel Mob gets +1/+1 for each other squirrel on the battlefield. So that'll just get infinitely big with your Squirrel Nest combo. And in your squirrel tribal deck, you just have to make sure that that has haste or is able to attack. You do your Squirrel Nest combo, and then you crash in for infinite damage. Maybe you give it trample or unblockable or what have you. Werebear is a bear that is also a mana dork that has Threshold. So here we go. Threshold, Werebear gets +3/+3. You have Threshold as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. So it's a druid. Like I was saying, druids give us mana. It's a 1/1 for green 1. Has Threshold, becomes a 4/4. So you use it to power out your early and mid-game plays. When you're late game and you draw it or still have it with 7 cards in your graveyard, it crashes in for 4. Cool card. Saw lots of play. I still play it in my Arixmethes, the Slumbering Isle deck. I still have Werebear in it. Gives me mana, gives me attack late game. So super cool. Wild Mongrel, another thing if you care about discarding cards. It's a 2/2 Hound for green 1. Discard a card from your hand. Wild Mongrel gets +1/+1. And also, remember this, becomes the color of your choice until end of turn. So sometimes that matters. Moving on to the gold cards, the multicolored cards. Original printing of Decimate. My boy Brando's favorite card. Green, 2. Destroy target artifact, target creature, target enchantment, and target land. Boom. Just kill them all. That's awesome. I mentioned a bunch of different Atags. There's Lithatog, Fangatog, Psychotog, Sarcotog, Atagatag, of course, and Thaumatog. Those are all, for the exception of Atagatag, they're all 1/2s for color 1. And they all have 2 abilities. You sacrifice a thing or you sacrifice a different thing. They get +1/+1 until end of turn. And the theory is you sacrifice all the things, then you sacrifice the Lithatog or the Psychotog, what have you, to the Atagatag, and you crash in for commander damage 21. That was how I did it. You can get them back with Second Sunrises or Twilight's Call or whatever your mass graveyard getter backer was because you're playing 5 colors. Super fun deck, very underrepresented tribe, very fun, and Atags have been around since Antiquities, where we saw original Atag. We saw them again in Stronghold or Exodus, sometime in there with Chronotog and Necrotog, and I think there's one more. We saw him again in Odyssey. We see one in Mirrodin, and then I think we see one again in Time Spiral, but I don't remember. Maybe it was a reprint of original Atog. Maybe that's what it was, like a time-shifted one. Anyways, artifacts. We've got all those eggs. You sacrifice and pay 2, draw a card. They give you mana. That's Brea Ethereum Sculptor players know what I'm talking about. All right, Mirari. This is like the flagship card. This is the card that is actually the set symbol, which happens sometimes, I guess. It's a legendary artifact for 5. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you can pay 3. If you do, you put a copy of that spell onto the stack. You may choose new targets for that copy. You just copy a spell, you can choose new targets for that copy. That's what it does. So that is a fairly powerful card. I know it doesn't see lots of play, but I think that it should, because you just get to copy whatever you want. Like, if you want to do something twice and it costs more than 3 to cast it the first time, Mirari's worth it, right? I know, like, the first thing you copy costs 8 and then everything else costs 3 after that, but that's got to go in decks. It just has to. I guess at me on Twitter, @CadPopcast. Where do you play your Mirari? That's what I want to know. Last up here, we are going to look at the uncommons, the Threshold lands. There's one of them that I actually play. That's Cabal Pit. That is black, tap, sacrifice it. If you have Threshold, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So that is sort of a removal spell on a land. In my lands deck, if I can play 2 or 3 lands per turn with Threshold, I sacrifice it each time. I can kill creatures with that. I've actually killed my 6/6 commander with that, a Child of Alara, to nuke the whole board. So cool cards, got lots of good memories for me there. Cephalid Colosseum, tap, sack it, draw 3, then discard 3. That's a combo card because it's on a land. Barbarian Ring is a shock. The green one is a +3/+3 for a green. And the white one, the white one, you gain 4 life. Great, great. So last card, I guess, Tarnished Citadel, less individual card. Tarnished Citadel, that is a land that taps for colorless, cool, or tap for any colored mana, but you take 3 damage. Seems terrible, but if you are playing 3, 4, 5 color decks, you can tap it for any color mana if you're hosed out of a color, but you don't have to. You can tap it for just a colorless, which City Brass Mana Confluence, you can't. So cool card. I've seen it in many CEDH lists because they're just concerned about making the color. They tap it maybe once, maybe twice, and then they win the game. Finally, basic lands. I like to look at all of them just right on air to give myself one final kind of thought. I have all of these in multiples. I paint lots of basic lands for people. I think the most widely requested of the Odyssey basics are the islands and the forests. I know that there is that one Lightning Plains that Eric Peterson did that seems to be the expensive one in foil, but ultimately they're all beautiful. I love basic lands. I love how they kind of tie the set together. I'm familiar with Otaria, the continent that Odyssey takes place on, and this just makes it, this feels like magic to me, you know what I mean? Like grade 7 Ryan or grade 8 Ryan, however old I was, these are the lands that I played with, and that is special to me. So if that's what makes Odyssey special to you, of course, let me know. Let me know your Odyssey hidden gems at CadPopcast. Commander Ad Populum on Facebook. There'll be threads for the episode on both platforms. Of course, huge thank you to FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for everything Odyssey related. Big thank you to all of the patrons. Patreon.com/CadPopcast. Couldn't do it without you. I appreciate it. If patronage isn't correct for you, either right now or ever, a share, a retweet, telling your friends, starting a conversation at an LGS and sending me the topic, cadpopcast@gmail.com. All of those things also help the show grow and improve and have fun and interesting topics to talk and listen about. So hit me up anytime. I'm always glad to hear from you. Until then, or next episode, I'll see you next Wednesday.